Linux OTC. Welcome to episode 19. We're your hosts. I'm Bill.
I'm Eric.
I'm Majid.
And I'm Leo. I'm always last, man. I'm always last.
Well, and we got to get somebody with a... Actually, you should have been before Majid, but
Why?
Why?
LMNOPQRS.
That should be last then, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
But then Leo can't do his, and I'm not doing it.
I know, and
yeah. Oh,
that's
hey,
true.
I didn't think
That's
about
true,
that.
yeah.
That's true, though. That doesn't fit otherwise.
it is what it is. And this is all going into the show.
Of course, it's fantastic content. That's all we need.
It
Content.
is.
It's all about
Well-
content nowadays.
No,
Speaking
we're
of
talking
content,
heads, man.
What have we got besides nothing, by the way? Because I got
That's the
nothing.
point. That's the point.
I got nothing except for the new Audacity, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what, here's-
I seem to be doing musical chairs with my distros.
Yeah, you're on Feren OS now. How's that going for you?
Yeah, so basically, last time I was on here, I was running Ubuntu, Feren, and Manjaro, and now I'm still running Ubuntu, Feren, and Manjaro, but on different machines.
At the same time.
Well, not at the same time. No, I'm not. I'm not Moss.
So was the thinking that you wanted to see how they ran on the different systems?
No, it was more to do with so I had Ubuntu on my laptop. I wanted to distro hop because I get bored. I wanted to try Feren, so I got rid of the Ubuntu install and put Feren on. I then realized that it didn't have touchpad gestures, and although KDE does work with touchscreens, it's not really a touchscreen thing in the way that Gnome is.
Is that an
So
X thing? Like X versus Wayland thing?
Apparently so.
Yeah.
Although having said that, there are plenty of distros that are on X that also have touchpad gestures. So I don't.
Right.
I'm not-
That's touch egg. Okay. People
Yeah,
told
yeah.
me that it's not touch egg,
Yeah, it's touche.
but it's spelled touch egg. It is
Yeah, no,
touch egg. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
that's what I thought as well. But anyway,
Yeah.
so then I decided, okay, fine, I'm gonna. I thought, you know what, this would be better with a mouse and keyboard. So I then decided that my Ubuntu install on my main machine, which is this one, I got rid of that and put Feren OS on this, and then put Manjaro Gnome onto the laptop. And so interesting things about Feren. Feren is the reason why I was interested was that it's basically Mint but with KDE. I mean, that's not strictly true, but I mean, it might as well be. You know, it's got all the Mint tools, it's got the Mint update, it's got the software store, everything like that. So, but it's KDE because Mint don't do a KDE version anymore, do they? I know they used to, but
Since
they don't
18,
anymore.
The
Yeah.
18 was the last one that they shipped to KDE
Yeah.
desktop.
So I'm quite liking it, enjoying it. It looks really nice. It's performant. It means I can play around and customize it in the way that I couldn't necessarily customize Cinnamon when I used that. Manjaro Gnome, I've surprisingly enjoyed.
And you're
in
on
the sense-
45, right?
Yeah, yes. The reason I say I've surprisingly enjoyed is I thought, because whenever I've read about Manjaro, it's always about the KDE spin and about how much work they've put on the KDE spin to make it look, give it its own kind of aesthetic. So I thought that Manjaro Gnome would be like vanilla, like Fedora style. It's not. It's themed quite well. It's got its specific tools and stuff like that. It's very performant, I must say. I mean, it's not exactly a wimp that laptop that I've got, but even then, it works really well.
They use a
It
lot
is
of
a
extensions.
Yeah, they do.
yeah,
it is.
yeah.
okay.
One of the
It is a
One of the
different
cool
way of
things they
doing
did-
things, though. It's a different way of doing things. Arch, and it's not Arch isn't something I've got any experience with, so there's a bit of a learning curve there. Yeah, sorry, Eric, you were saying.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say the interesting thing about, you're right, maybe people don't know that the GNOME version is pretty bespoke, just really a lot of effort goes into it. And what they sort of have done is grab all these different extensions in terms of customizing the desktop and give you the like a desktop layout chooser, which I think
Yeah.
is kind of cool, where you can pick the style that you want. And that's kind of like a Zorin OS thing.
Yeah.
Where that's in Zorin as well. And I'm not sure where that extension originated, but so you have that, you have, there's just a lot of stuff built in to let you it is radically not just vanilla
Yeah,
Gnome.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
not even
Which
close.
as I said, I wasn't expecting. And the thing is that I've said it before ad nauseum. GNOME really does work well when you've got a touch screen and laptop, and with touchpad gestures. It's on a Wayland session, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think yes. Speaking of which, you got your tablet. What did you decide to put on there?
Well, broke from a couple things. So I've been wanting to try Fedora, the 29 or 39 beta, and that gave me a couple things. One, a very vanilla GNOME session.
Yeah, yeah.
And then also Wayland. So I haven't done very much with Wayland. This is my only non-NVIDIA piece of hardware.
Okay.
So yeah, it's actually been great. I had it. It got delivered right before I went to the hospital, and my wife brought it up to me. And so the time I spent there, I was just playing around with it. I tried Pop OS and regular Ubuntu and Plasma, and just a bunch of different stuff, Cinnamon. But in terms of like just using it on a touch screen, GNOME like suddenly makes a lot of sense. And vanilla GNOME in particular suddenly makes a lot of sense. You're like, oh, I get it. So I'm still not entirely sure why, considering that it's a desktop environment on regular computers with a mouse and keyboard, why they've leaned so heavily into that design aesthetic. Because I still don't think it makes a lot of sense in that application. I still want a dock or, a taskbar or some sort of, static, way to interact with applications. I want to be able to window things and move stuff around. But on a smaller screen, smaller touchscreen, I guess, it makes a lot of sense. It works really well. There's some nice gesture support. The on-screen keyboard works really well. So yeah, and having Fedora with Wayland was definitely interesting as well, because I thought for sure I was going to miss things, global shortcuts, some other things that I just had run into problems with previously, and I really didn't. I mean, it runs great.
So I've got
fractional scaling worked.
Okay. I've got a couple of theories on this. None of which have a huge amount of evidence, so feel free to ignore. But one theory is that they did a little bit of a Microsoft in that they thought that touchscreens were going to completely permeate everywhere and on all devices, and so started very early on going towards a touch paradigm. You remember Windows 8. I mean, Windows 8 is over 10 years old now, right?
Yeah, and I think the whole GNOME thing started about the same time as the Windows 8 thing.
And the reality is that it hasn't as much. We've got, you do get a lot of laptops with touchscreens, but interestingly, you don't get Macs with touchscreens yet. And so I think people still aren't necessarily, it's not a have-to feature for a lot of people in a laptop or a device, a computing device. If they want a touchscreen, they'll just get an iPad or an Android phone or whatever.
Yeah, I've often wondered, because I wonder how many people that have touchscreen laptops and just don't use them, because my wife's got one, a Dell, a really nice Dell with an i5, and it's got the touchscreen. She uses Plasma on it and has never touched the screen.
I've never once in my entire laptop computing life have ever thought, it'd be way quicker if I could poke it instead.
Yeah,
Never.
I mean, what would look great on my screen is a bunch of fingerprints and drippings
Also,
from
Exactly.
donut icing and everything.
Yeah, okay, true. But if you do get one and you do start using it, then after a while it becomes second nature to do it, and you miss it when it's not miss it. You can obviously manage without a touchscreen laptop. Talk about your first world problem. But I mean, if you're used to it, it does sometimes. You do find yourself when you're on a non-touch screen, kind of pointing towards it. Now, admittedly, I've been using touchscreen laptops since oh God, how long? 2014, 2013. You know, a long time.
I
So I
think that has a
suppose
lot more to do with it.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that's what it
Right.
is. You know.
Yeah, because I use an iPad Pro with the little keyboard docky sit up, basically make
Yeah,
it a
and the
laptop
Magic Keyboard.
thing at
Yeah.
work. No, no, not a Magic Keyboard. This is like the Folio thing where you
Oh,
can.
okay, okay, okay.
And so it is big enough to be like a 12-inch laptop. That is what this thing is,
Wow.
and it's there's no mouse to it unless you bring in a Magic Mouse or you get the right kind of Bluetooth mouse to work with it. And so, but I've never got off of that device and got onto a real laptop and thought, man, if I could just swipe to the next app. No, I just Command tab in a case like that to get to
So,
it. And it's
okay,
way faster
so
than having to reach.
yeah, so that was my first theory. The second theory I've got is that having then gone down this road, and it may not necessarily, having one gone down this road, they realized that one of the benefits, if you want to look at it that way, is that Gnome can get out of your way if you want to concentrate on a specific app at a specific time. I don't know whether you're coding or video editing or whatever, and you don't want distractions and you don't want other things, then it lends itself a bit more to that. And so because they talk a lot about workflow. You know, if you ever look at like the Gnome promotional material and stuff, there's always a lot about getting your work done, about workflow, about being more
Removing
productive
distractions.
yeah. And so because before I put Feren on this device here, I actually had for the first time put Ubuntu Gnome, the vanilla Ubuntu on here, because I thought to myself, I've not actually tried Gnome on a normal desktop with a keyboard and mouse and whatever. And it is true, it does get out of the way, and it does let you concentrate on what it is that you want to do. So that's my second theory as to why GNOME is the way that it is.
Yeah. What else is there?
Well,
unless the point of you running a Linux desktop is to rice the desktop. What is the point of a desktop? That's it. Get out of the way. Let me work on the audio or the video or the whatever project it is that I'm running on. I think because you've said that, you've described an almost perfect desktop.
Well,
Yeah.
and honestly, for me, using a smaller screen, 12.5-inch screen on this, that's absolutely true. And I could see, as the screen gets smaller, the need for real estate grows. And so using vanilla GNOME on here versus, something like Ubuntu where they've got the dock on the left and all of that stuff, it really does let you have just that extra amount of space. And then with the scaling that Wayland gives you, you can tune it. So if
Yeah,
it was
I was
going
gonna say
between like
this.
125 and 150. So on 125, it's a pretty big space, but it's also a lot smaller. So if it's text heavy, then it's hard to you want to, so 150 is great for doing like documents or email or stuff like that.
I do a lot of writing, and 150 on my framework is absolutely pleasant. It's fantastic. I think if you do the math, it's basically like 1600 by 900. And I mean, the 1080p folks will be like, "Oh, that's terrible," but it's perfect for writing.
And then I noticed I was doing some things where I wanted a little extra space, either having multiple windows open or just something that needed, I needed to see more things at one time. Went down to 125, and that gives you a lot more room, but still that extra 25% makes it visible versus 100% on this size screen is just too small. I can't even read what's on there. So yeah, fractional scaling is fantastic, and so that's been great. The gesture support in Wayland has been really good. We're very close. We're very close, and those last mile problems, I think the more people we can convince to just at least use it part of the time. If you
Yeah, I think.
go ahead.
Oh yeah. I've been on Ubuntu. 23. What is it? 2310. That's the one that just.
Yeah,
released, right?
2310, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that last mile is kind of fixed up for me now. I have not, since I've been running it, thought about leaving it, and that says a lot because I'm a Mint fan. But Mint's going to be another couple iterations, like major iterations, before they fully embrace Wayland.
Yeah, I saw the
But
news thing saying, was it 2026, something like that?
yeah. So,
Well,
but
you'll have the option before that, but
oh, of
they're not
course,
going to.
yeah. And I suppose it'll still be X by default at that point, but
Yeah,
it'll be
right.
Cinnamon will be running on Wayland and ready to use and especially test, right? But I think Gnome on Wayland right now, Gnome 45 specifically on Wayland, has pretty much handled it. My last big stopper was scaling on one screen and then plugging up to a 1080p screen. The scaling switch that you get whenever when you go from one screen to the other was bad, and I think I think most of it wasn't GNOME itself; it was apps. So I think I should be praising the apps more because I know the Firefox Snap is Wayland first now. Not all Firefoxes, but the Firefox Snap is Wayland first. As well as there are a lot of apps now that actually support the Wayland backend, like Discord.
So
Which
you don't
was
have to go into the
surprising.
flags and enable the Wayland support?
Not if you use the Snap, Bill.
Oh, no. Thank you.
Yeah. So if you do it the arch way, you still got to do it the hard way, which
Yeah,
I guess
well.
those words are synonymous anyway. But yeah,
We're a
and
bunch
then,
of sadists.
yeah. Discord is the same way. That was a big stopper for me because it's a lot of reading in Discord. So they now support a Wayland backend through the Snap, and that's another thing. Is I think because it's Ubuntu centric and Ubuntu runs on Wayland, and the Snapcraft is an Ubuntu thing that whether or not the apps get updated, whatever, the apps look to that desktop for what they should enable and what they should keep back, and because of that. All the apps that I use run fantastically on a Wayland desktop, whether or not I suppose they're using the Wayland backend. They have to because I'm scaling, and they all look fantastic and not blurry, except Bitwarden. Bitwarden still looks terrible, but I don't look at it that much.
So I'm a little bit of a layperson when it comes to this. I genuinely just haven't had a lot of interest, and so I haven't spent a lot of time. To me, something like X Wayland seems like that sort of bridge between apps that have been already updated and are ready and apps that aren't. And am I thinking of it in the right way? Like X Wayland is like sort of that. It's a full X server running that allows X apps to be spawned and
It's
run.
a trimmed X environment to
Okay.
run X applications on a Wayland environment. So if the apps are ready, like you were kind of describing before, if the apps are ready, then you don't need X Wayland anymore. They're just running on Wayland. So
Yeah.
there's no need. But the cool thing is when they're running on Wayland, they scale perfectly. So you get what you expect when you set it to 125 or 150
So
scale.
can I in my tiny lizard brain can I equate X Wayland to something like Proton,
Yes.
where it's okay? That's kind of what I was thinking how it
That's
worked, and I wasn't
X Wayland
entirely
is
sure.
a translation layer for X so that those applications can run on Wayland.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, because otherwise
So I
Wayland
could-
wouldn't know how to draw them, and because they don't respect a lot of the rules that Wayland has put in place, which arguably maybe there are too many rules, but
Yeah, it's substantial.
I love security, and anybody that also loves security probably has a little bit of a hatred for X, just because of the way that you can reach around
The
what
keystrokes,
you're-
be able to.
yeah, and not just that, just like you're able to look into other apps. So
Yeah.
Wayland's doing a good thing, even if it is a little rough.
So that's where portals come in then, right? So that's where you start getting portals are supporting. Okay. Yeah, I
Yep,
I
you
just
have the
need to
Wayland
dig more
portals
into.
that. Yeah, and Flatpak supports them, so the apps integrate in fantastically that way. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. It's this whole
Okay.
big GNOME ecosystem thing, which is
I'm
why
starting
I think,
to put it.
yeah, this is why I think the GNOME experience is better than the other experiences on Wayland, because GNOME and the groups that support GNOME, like Red Hat and Canonical, are pushing it forward. It's why the experience is good. The money's there.
So the only other desktop really is Plasma that supports a Wayland session, right? KWin. I just watched Nico's video on. I forget the title of it, but it's the latest one he did around Wayland, and
I suppose
he
it
was
was
saying-
a YouTube title, so it was 18 words long, right?
Yeah, probably. But it was basically the gist that the Plasma team was thinking like, do we redo a compositors? But then KWin already supports like 90% of Wayland, and so. You guys, none of you use Plasma.
I do.
I mean, I've started over the last year dabbling in KDE. As I said, it wasn't something I ever really did before. As I said, Feren, which I've got on this machine, runs KDE, but it's still on X. I don't think there's a Wayland session.
Maddeningly, well, for people like me, if you're running on Arch, you guys force me into this every time.
Do you run Arch, Bill?
Yeah, I do.
Bill?
Yeah,
Oh my
I'm not
God,
taking responsibility for this anymore. But
I had
if
no
you're,
idea that you ran Arch. No idea.
it defaults to Wayland now on Arch. The whole it actually works better on Wayland Plasma now. But if you're running an application that's not Wayland ready, you don't. The little application icon will be the little yellow W, meaning it's like I assume it's there to tell you that you're running a non-Wayland application.
X Wayland, yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't say X Wayland though, which also drives me nuts. It's just a W, an orange W.
What are you running, man? You're running. Wayland.
Well, one program was listen to me program. There's a app on there called Package Browser, which is just a GUI for searching for the packages that you want, and then you can copy and paste into the terminal.
Wait a minute, you're telling me you run Arch, but you don't manually search for packages using
I do,
Yay
but
or
if I'm
something?
if I know what I want, I can type it in and no problem. But if I'm like
Pac-Man S whatever your thing, yeah, exactly. It's so
or
easy,
Yay,
I know.
Yay is a little bit easier.
Yeah, you don't even
and
have
you can,
to do an S on that. You just Yay
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm discovering all this for the first time, and it is. I understand why
pro
so many
tip.
I understand why so many distros are Ubuntu based now. I do understand.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to say anything bad. I'm just saying that because so many are Ubuntu based, it means you've got so many transferable skills. You already know,
Well, and
the
a lot more of
lingo
the
to an
work
extent.
is done for you. You
Yeah.
take a distro like Manjaro, and you're going to base it on Arch. You still got a lot of work to do to present
as I'm learning,
something palatable for normal people to use. So, all that is done for you, and something based on Ubuntu. So, but yeah, you do know right away when you're running things on Plasma, but. That being said, as far as the way the desktop behaves on Wayland, I've noticed that it scales everything so quickly, and that laptop is also one of those Optimus. It's got the built-in Intel GPU, and then also the NVIDIA thing,
Oh, right.
and it offloads the rendering splendidly. I mean, it runs everything it can in the integrated Intel chip, but then you've got access, like on OBS Studio, you got access to the NVIDIA encoder, so that's hardware encoding, right out of the box. And then if you're running Steam, then it just uses your NVIDIA GPU brilliantly. And I did not have that well of an experience when I was using it for X, because I've had this machine for about 6-7 years now. And all your desktop elements scale correctly, because it's also a 15-inch 4K screen, if you can imagine that insanity.
So you do it at 200% though, right?
Well, I lately, because of Audacity, I use.
Are you having problems with Audacity, Bill?
Oh, God.
I didn't know about that either.
So if you try to use Audacity with 4K and then 200%, you'll get this when the playhead is going across the screen. You got that green line. It'll trail green lines all the way across the screen,
That's
Nice.
and it's all a scaling issue. So if you turn it to 1080p instead at 100%, you've got the exact same, as far as I can tell, the exact same picture, but you don't have that problem of scaling. And maybe when the fabled new version of Audacity comes out that we keep hearing about, maybe
And
all
because
these things will be worked out. But
the problem is WX widgets. It was never made
yeah,
to deal. The toolkit that Audacity is built on top of was not made for any of this stuff, and it's old. So swapping out the toolkit to make it work on modern desktops, and not just Linux desktops, modern all of them desktops,
Yeah.
is going to be a fantastic thing, and you get a facelift with it. So I'm really excited for that. Not that I
Oh,
look
I
at it
can't
that
wait.
much, but
So Eric, so I haven't used many Fedora or Fedora spins or anything based on Fedora, so pardon my ignorance. But did you have any? I vaguely remember that they don't have proprietary drivers and codecs and whatever out of the box. I mean, it's relatively easy to add them. I think that the RPM Fusion
okay,
repo.
you can't
Yeah.
say RPM Fusion is relatively easy because most people don't know what they're doing when they're copying
Yeah,
and
no,
pasting
okay,
those
fine, bro. I'm
commands
just
into the
trying.
command line.
So
Yeah.
Fedora now is making it easier on people to use it as just sort of a general use desktop. It used to be pretty hard line where it was like only FOSS software.
Yeah.
And if you wanted anything outside of that, you had to manually add a bunch of repos. And then, yes, you went through and added specific things. I wouldn't say that if you were a proficient Linux user, it was anything outside of the realm of like normal use of a terminal. And it wasn't like, oh my goodness, I'm like editing a bunch of config files and
No,
like doing
it's
a
as
lot
hard
of
as
like really,
adding a PPA.
yeah, it really wasn't that difficult. It was just
except
knowing
you don't
what
have
you
to
needed
restart the
do.
machine after adding a PPA.
Right. Well, but the new way of going about it is right within the installer. They ask you, do you want to
That's
enable
nice.
external repositories, and that's going to give you at least some of that stuff that you need. Now, the nice thing about running this is it's just Intel. It's an Intel chip and it's an Intel GPU. It's all just the drivers are just there. When I'm on an NVIDIA system, yeah, then you got to go get the NVIDIA driver. It could be, and there's a couple different ways of doing it depending on how you want to set it up. If you're using it for CUDA type stuff and compute power, then you want to probably
Cooties.
go this route. Yeah, you got CUDAs. And then if you go, just a standard sort of hybrid route, then that could be a certain one. So it's still not like cut and dried. It's not as easy as installing Ubuntu and like just getting on with your life. But I think they have made some pretty big strides to making it a much more user-friendly experience.
It's halfway between having to set stuff up in Endeavor, an Arch-based distribution, and Ubuntu, a fully ready-to-go distribution. It's somewhere in
Right.
between. But my favorite thing about Fedora is that they beat Arch to the punch like all the time.
Yeah,
So
I
what
love that Fedora
differences-
has to. They jump ahead, right? They
Bill
took the lead
almost
on
said something. I love
Pipewire.
it.
They take the lead on Pipewire. They're taking the lead on Wayland. This is what they do. They sort of push, and that's the point of Fedora. If you think
Yep.
about it in terms of its place within the Red Hat ecosystem, that's where the new technology lives. They bring it in there. They've got a pretty wide user base and technical user base. That's another thing that Fedora
Yeah.
can boast that a lot of distros don't, is that a pretty large percentage of their users are developers, are sysadmins, are people who are like pretty serious computer users, versus Mint, who's probably got some of those people, but a lot of sort of what were we calling them, normals, whatever. So Fedora, they put out a new cutting edge technology to the people who are most able to absorb that and give qualified feedback and hash it out. And then that goes downstream. And then all of a sudden, within a couple releases, you start to see it, whatever. They're sort of breaking ground, I guess, is the best way to say it.
It does feel like they're a more curated distribution for a more technical crowd, I suppose. It seems like you get the type of person that's a little bit more engaged in the whole bug filing process, and
Yeah, much more likely to, if they encounter a problem, to actually follow through on it and try to fix it.
right.
Yeah.
And they enjoy being the kind of person that enjoys being part of that process, So yeah.
So what differences did you find between the vanilla GNOME that's on Fedora to because you said you used Ubuntu as well, and Ubuntu's obviously got a skinned version of GNOME, with the dock and whatever. Did you find much difference?
Yeah, I mean, it's so Fedora, I feel, in many ways, is a little bit lighter, if that makes sense. It it comes with a full set of applications and the full desktop environment, but it's very much a showcase for GNOME itself. Like whatever release you're on, you're going to get their welcome screen. Fedora adheres very closely to whatever GNOME's trying to showcase for that release.
Well, not just that.
They work.
They only make one change to GNOME. They add their own watermark. That's it. And
Yeah.
it just says Fedora down at the bottom. That is the only addition, as far as I understand, that they make.
Yeah, and I think that's because they work so closely with that team.
Right.
It's not like they're just pulling it cold off the shelf and working with it. Like this is a very collaborative. Like GNOME needs someplace to land, right? A new release needs a stable base to land on to get out into the world, and that's not going to be an Ubuntu derivative or an Ubuntu. That's going to be Fedora, and then Fedora is going to support that, and then also bring in these new technologies.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful part, is it's sort of a melting pot of like cutting edge everything, and they update and release fast enough that they keep pace with it. So it's not a rolling release, but it's fast anyway.
Yeah,
and it's very cutting edge.
The release cadences of GNOME and Fedora are the way they are because the other needs the other. So
Yeah.
you're getting these 6 month releases on Fedora because GNOME needs that landing spot.
Yeah, and
Well,
and the
isn't it
beautiful
true
part
that
too is if you. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, isn't it true that many GNOME developers are also Fedora developers, and then likewise the opposite? I think.
I'm not sure about that, but
Have-
maybe.
I don't know, but it makes sense if that would be. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or at least
or at
contributing.
least
I don't
Red
know if
Hat
it'd be
developers.
yeah.
What about from a
But the nice thing,
usability point of view? What about from a usability point of view? Vanilla GNOME versus a skinned GNOME.
So you have to be willing to do it the GNOME way, right? That's kind of like everything has a way, and like as in terms of a saying, right? And honestly, I think the GNOME way really is a true saying. It's so different in terms of a desktop paradigm. It's not Mac, it's not Windows, it's not Android or iOS or anything else. It's its own thing, and they don't really give you a lot of guardrails in terms of like if you just sit a new user down in front of a GNOME session, they have to kind of figure it out because it's not as intuitive and straightforward. But that said, it's also not like overwhelmingly complicated. Like it's very sort of intuitive once you sort of once you stop thinking of it as in terms of Windows and Mac and just start thinking of it in terms of here's a screen. Like what were we saying? Like what is a good desktop experience, right? It's to get out of your way. And that's really what they're trying to do, is get out of your way. Now, if you're coming from and you have this preconceived notion of Windows or Mac OS or whatever, it can be a little uncomfortable because I don't have Windows controls. I don't have a taskbar. I don't have a tray. I don't have like all these sort of conventions that you're used to. And I still contend that the tray is one thing that's hard to get rid of because a lot of applications like Telegram and Discord and other things expect that tray to be there. If you're on GNOME and you close Telegram, you didn't close it. It's still there, but you can't get to it now unless you open it again. The paradigm doesn't exactly translate, but if you take the time, and also I'll contend if it's the right experience, right, it's the right piece of hardware, that system, that approach to a desktop makes a heck of a lot of sense.
I want to go back a little bit because you were kind of comparing GNOME to Mac and Windows. And I'll grant you the Windows one, but I think a Mac user could sit in front of GNOME, and if you told them it's pretty much like Mac, they'd figure it out. They'd know exactly what to do, how to move around, how to get to apps and things like that.
It's that initial getting to the apps because there's nothing on the screen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You've got the bar at the top with your activities, time, and then the system tray. And then you've got sort of a blank screen.
Yeah.
And that's it. you know. So to get to that first application, you got to kind of think, okay, what do I do here? But once you get past that, I think, yeah.
The double swipe, the double 3-finger swipe up is the hardest thing to remember to do if you're coming from Mac, because there's no equivalent to Mac in Mac to something like that. They've got I think it's called Launchpad. You just hit that button, all the icons come up. You can kind of do that in Gnome, right? If
There's
you
a
go
hot
Gnome-
corner, isn't there? There's a hot corner.
Not by
That's how. Okay.
Not in
No, I mean,
vanilla
if you
Gnome.
hit-
There's not.
If you go to activities, and I think intuitively someone might think, okay, well, what's on the screen for me to click? I don't necessarily think the clock's going to do anything. I don't need the volume controls or the
Yeah.
networking. So what's this activities thing? You click that, and all of a sudden, okay, I've got my screen overview, and if I have any applications that are open, they're going to be shown there. But then I've also got the taskbar at the bottom, and then there's this little icon that
The grid
shows,
thing.
you know, six dots or whatever, 9 dots. And if I click that, oh, okay, well, here's all my applications. I guess what I'm saying is that it wouldn't take a reasonably proficient computer user very
Oh
long
no, not at all.
to figure out.
No, I mean,
And
because
then you just sort of
we all
adjust
use
your-
the super key.
And that's
Yeah.
true.
No,
Like you just
you
hit
know
the
who
super
gets
key
on
and
great
boom.
with GNOME? Kids.
Bill.
I gave
Kids.
Pop OS to my kids a couple of years ago on some old laptops, and they just within minutes were right into it and had it going. I asked them, "Are you guys doing okay with this?" You know, because we're all of us in the Linux world. You know, we like to give GNOME a little bit of crap here and there for breaking the desktop paradigm, as they say, but yet kids, they just fly right into it. I don't know. And then the touchscreen thing we were talking about a little bit ago, they are expecting touch screens on laptops because they went trying to use that and it wasn't working on the laptops I gave them. And that's because the laptops they use at school are little ThinkPads with the flip around touchscreen on them and that. So that's kind of
It's a
interesting.
wonderful
And
back, yeah.
I wonder, anecdotally, I think that might be just an example of somebody without a lot of the old baggage from using the old versions of Windows or what have you. You know, they're coming clean, and you know, really, their only experience with a user interface is the phones or the tablets. So,
the other side of this is this came with Windows 10, which had a reasonable touch experience. Like I could do things that had an on-screen keyboard. I can get to different programs and whatever. But it was still very much a Windows desktop, right? There wasn't a lot of difference. It just happened to be able to get the things with touch, right? It wasn't like Windows 8, which totally transformed into like a touch interface. And then I upgraded to Windows 11 because I've been using Windows 11 anyway, and they said that's a better touch experience, and it is. But it's still a Windows desktop. The taskbar tends to shrink down. It'll just kind of get out of the way, give you more space. And you got to kind of swipe up to get to it, and then you can switch apps there. And it's actually not a bad experience. But I overall found the GNOME approach, I think, a little easier and a little more sort of, it made better use of the space on the screen. It definitely got out of my way more. But I guess the point I was trying to make too is that it's interesting that Windows 11 is becoming looks more like a smartphone UI. There's a lot of like sort of rounding, big, lots of padding and space, and so that you can easily get to stuff. So the fact that sort of leaned in that direction anyway, and now other things are sort of also going in that direction. It's maybe they were a little ahead of the game. I don't know.
So what you're saying is Windows 8 should have just stayed the course, man, and then they would be fine.
that is interesting because it's like Windows succumbed to all of the negative press that 8 and 8.1 had, and this failed idea that everything was going to be a tablet, and they kind of backtracked in a way. You got your regular desktop, but you still got the live tiles. Well, now they've realized apparently that those tiles aren't worth a damn either. So
I loved those tiles.
I
were
loved those
fantastic,
tiles.
dude.
I'm one of these weirdos that actually quite
when you're
liked
running Pi-hole
Windows
and
8.
things, they just don't work. Or at least that was my experience. So
But
I'm
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
glad.
So yeah, I'm one of those weirdos that actually quite liked Windows 8 and 8.1 because I did have a touchscreen at the time, and I did quite like some of the gestures and stuff. I think it was too much, too soon, and whilst you can make you can say that, well, Linux users are proficient in technical people most of the time, and if they don't like something, they'll just move on to something else. Most people using Windows are not. And so for the normies, like we were talking about, it was too much and it was too quick.
Yeah.
And
There needed to be a campaign to introduce people to the Windows button. Because if you knew about the Windows button, if you knew
Yeah.
that was going to launch the main menu, the start menu,
Yeah.
then there would not have been this same outcry of, oh God, Windows is unusable. How do you even get to anything? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it was. If you could push the button, you'd be fine.
Yeah. And so, unfortunately, what the Microsoft then just did, as I said, is that they just rolled back on all of that, and then found themselves almost starting again. So, like,
Well, they
Windows.
did the Vista thing. They lost like people's attention with 8, and when they fixed it in 8.1, everybody already hated 8, so it didn't
Yeah.
matter what they did.
Yeah.
But
8.1 was all right, actually.
the only main thing that they did that got conversion, they just put the button back.
Yeah.
Instead of having to like go down into the corner and then it would show up, they just put the button there, and that was good enough for a lot of people.
There was an amazing project back
I don't know
then.
if you guys have ever
that-
heard of the channel
Start
Tech
8.
Alter.
Yes. Tech Alter, yes.
He does some really nice.
Yeah, he does.
Almost like video essay type stuff on technology, but he did one recently on the slow death of Windows.
Yes, I saw
And-
that. That was really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Really good stuff, and it basically talks about exactly about this, where it was like Microsoft has tried to position Windows as time has gone on. They've done things with touchscreen, and they were convinced that touch was going to be it, and that's what led to Windows 8. All the effort that they put into that, and then they realized, well, no, that's not going to be it. And then all the effort they had to remove that stuff, yet there was still cruft from that left over. And then they went towards virtual reality, like virtual VR was going to be the thing. And so, HoloLens and all of that programming and coding that went into that wasn't insignificant in any stretch of the imagination. So now, and then that sort of was like, okay, well, that's not going to be it. And they pulled that out and just sort of trying to position themselves. But he does a really great job. I'm not advertising for him, but it was probably the best
he
does
explanation
very
of
good,
like why Windows is the way it is.
Yeah.
Over the last 10, 15 years. So.
Yeah, no, I mean that he has some very good and interesting videos. I remember there was one about why enthusiast brands will always let you down.
I think
Which I thought
Windows
was a really good one. It's a couple of years old, that one, but it's a good one.
Yeah, I think Windows should have just stayed the course with all the decisions that they made. They're lamenting now. I think Nadella now said they shouldn't have dropped the Windows Phone when they did.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah, that came out this week, wasn't it? That they
It was
They
so
pulled out
close
too
to
quick.
gaining enough market share. It was
Yeah.
it got good. It got
Yeah.
No,
really
it was
good.
good.
It was good. I had one as well. I had one, and I really enjoyed it.
I remember going to Best Buy and standing there and looking at the different things, iPhones and Androids and the Windows Phone, and the Windows Phone was very compelling with the way that the navigation was, the UI, the tiles, like it was. I very, very close to buying that, and I could see that if they would have stayed in the game, that they would have been a contender.
And then they
It just-
transitioned to the Surface, and now they're trying to slowly kill what the Surface was.
Yeah.
I remember using the Windows Phone as an alternative to the Blackberry because I always wanted the more serious tools back then. And Blackberry, it's difficult to understand fully what went wrong with that because Blackberry was a proper performant device. And
I think
They
people
own
are going to
the
be talking
executive
about
market.
People are going to be talking about BlackBerry for years. I mean, there's already been a film on it. I reckon it'll be the kind of thing that ends up in humanities degrees and people's PhD theses of, how does a company go from such a strong position to being dead?
Well, how do you withstand the disruption of something like iPhone to your business? you know, because that new shiny that had substance behind it. It wasn't just a flash in the pan. It wasn't just, you know, a diversion. It was a new way, like an actual real new way of doing this. And but what I remember during that time was that there were so many people that were so devoted to BlackBerry and the form factor and the slide out keyboard and the physical keys and
Yeah, I
being
was one
able
of
to
them.
really type, you know,
Yeah, I
like
was
type
too.
long form stuff. And I'm pretty sure like it had to be a high percentage of the executives and managerial types that loved those devices. And yeah, the fact that it just they tried to, you know, do these weird quasi touch, you know, you remember those weird models that sort of like they
Yeah,
tried
the storm
anything.
and all
Yeah.
this. Yeah,
Yeah, just didn't
That was
work.
a selling point for me because it had that kind of that track ball, and it wasn't a ball. It was like a, what do you call that thing where you can move your thumb on it, and it had a proper
Yeah.
yeah. It was
It's a
cursor
like a
trackball.
where you
yeah.
could point and click. And but I mean, it wasn't a mechanical ball. It just kind of tracked the movement, just like a
Yeah, yeah,
touchpad or something. And
yeah,
then you
yeah, yeah.
hit the button, and that was, to me, that made more sense because I was, you know, again, I'm from the old paradigm of
Well,
Windows
I mean,
95
You
and
hadn't
all of
fully
that.
embraced the touchscreen.
But I
Touchscreen
remember,
belongs
yeah,
places.
yes, and I remember thinking at the time, well, BlackBerry's always going to have better security. They're going to have a better security story because if you remember when Obama came into office, there was this story where he wanted an iPhone and the Secret Service wouldn't let him have one because the BlackBerries had better security, or at least that was their opinion. I don't know, and that might not be the case now, but at the time I remember thinking, well, yeah, that makes sense, you know, because that's a phone that's made for serious people. It's not a toy. And
well, it took a long time for Apple to gain acceptance in the corporate environment because
yeah,
they just
Well,
didn't have the tools.
it was apps, man. That was the thing. That's why BlackBerry failed. It was
yeah,
apps.
it absolutely
It
is.
wasn't
Yeah.
because of the they were hanging onto the keyboard too long, because there's still people that ask for that stuff today. It wasn't because of the little trackball, and it wasn't because of the operating system. It was because of the apps. When the apps moved over to iPhone won.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing that they were talking about with the what Satya Nadella, you know, said about Windows Phone. That, you know, if they just paid the big services, look, we'll pay you money, bring Instagram to Windows Phone, bring
But they already
Snapchat to
had,
bring phone.
didn't they
And
have the compatibility layer with Android at that point
That was
where you could run
later
Android
on.
apps?
That was later.
yeah,
Well, that's when I was looking at it because that
Oh,
made it
okay.
so. Yeah, that made it attractive to me because then at that point the apps weren't an issue. It was just like, well, that doesn't matter anymore.
But it
well, I
was
mean,
too
even
late.
BlackBerry
Like
had a translation as
perception
well.
of the Windows Phone had already solidified, just like perception of Windows 8 had already solidified. And there's nothing you can
Yeah.
do at a certain point.
Yeah,
And
it's
you
too
can- you
little,
can-
too late.
Yeah, you can have all of the apps without a translation layer. They could all be there, but people have moved on, and it's too late.
Well,
The
I
India-
suppose
the-
we should probably wrap this up.
Well, let me finish with this. We need apps on
oh.
Linux, so stop worrying about how they get on here, and stop worrying about which apps come over. And if you decide you want to agree with that app coming over to our ecosystem, because it looks like Adobe, there's hope.
How big of an
Oh.
issue do we really think this is? I mean, I don't want to get us into another long, protracted discussion, but like,
But we will.
I just don't see it as being not nearly as big as an issue as it was certainly 10 years ago, but
Oh,
even
it's
maybe
not.
5 years ago. Like, what's left besides design, video tools, maybe some audio? So beyond creatives.
Work tools that do not exist on the web. That's what's left.
Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, I always hear people say, well, AutoCAD and Adobe
Work.
and yeah, exactly. Like video editing tools, you know,
Work.
Vegas and all this other stuff like Pro Tools and even
Work. Yeah, yeah.
right. So,
Yeah.
but that's such a small. I mean, you think about the overall computer
Yeah, but think about
user
that
base.
though. If you use a computer at work all day long, you're very familiar with it. And if for some reason you go home and you want to be on a computer again, it is not a small thing to have the same exact environment that you know how to use and know how to work with at home
Right.
too.
Right.
It drives
No, I
a
don't
whole
disagree.
lot. Yeah.
But I just think that the number of arguments for, well, I can't use it because I don't have A, B, or C.
Oh, gaming! I guarantee it. I had a friend that was like full on, let's go Ubuntu, and is having to abandon it because League of Legends doesn't play. So one application is going to push him away.
And we've come a long way as far as that goes, but it's
Yeah.
still just Steam. I mean, a lot of your serious gamers, they're getting their games from the GeForce Now and the Xbox Game Pass and all that stuff, which,
Yeah.
technically may be able to work somehow or another with Proton, but there's really nothing out there to make that usable or to get it up and running for normal people, or normies. Sorry.
They've made a whole lot of progress, and I'm really proud of that. And I'll probably end up with a Steam Deck eventually.
Yeah.
But I've just moved to a PlayStation. So
Yeah.
Real quick before we get out of here, I want to announce I'm in the process. Well, I have for like the last 3 episodes been uploading our episodes to our hosting platform called Red Circle, but I've simultaneously been uploading to archive.org with the long-term goal of not using Red Circle at all anymore. But I think it's going to mean that I have to make a new RSS feed, because the RSS feed for now it points towards Red Circle. If I go full on to the archive.org, which is the goal, then everybody's going to have to reload or research for the RSS feed. Right now, it's going to both places. If you are listening to the show on your device, it's coming from Red Circle. If you are listening from the website, which I'd be interested to know how many people do that, the website is getting the audio straight from archive.org. And of course, the reasoning I'm wanting to do that is just to have ownership of the RSS feed, but also I'm not 100% sure I trust these third-party podcasting platforms when it comes to the intellectual rights and all that stuff that they have for these shows. When I set it up, I did not know how to handle all those things. Now I'm using a plug-in on the WordPress site, and it's actually brainless once you wrap your head around it.
my vote would be to have a grace period of maybe at least 3 episodes where we have both RSS feeds that are active, and whichever one you choose, you'll be good. And at the beginning of every show, we need to hey, if you haven't changed your RSS feed, change your RSS feed.
Right, and that's what I'm going to do here in the next week. Is I'm going to set up that second RSS feed. Then I'm going to just keep uploading to both for a while, and then at some point we're going to be warning everybody on every episode, hey, if you haven't moved over to the other RSS, go ahead and do that. The other thing that's irritating me is I've opted out of the ads, because some of you may remember before Majid and Eric was on the show, we were kind of playing around with dynamically inserted ads, and it was irritating and spooking some people out. And honestly, it was kind of out of place for a Linux podcast, because it was the kind of ads that were feeding people things that kind of creeps people like us out. Like, there was one story where a guy was driving past a police academy in Australia, and he got an ad as he was driving by for the recruitment division of the Australian Police Department.
Now that's some targeted advertising.
Yes, and I thought to myself, we were getting like $4 or $5 a month out of that, and that is nowhere near enough money to justify putting our listeners off like that. So yeah, I put the kibosh on it. But the irritating part is, even when you disable it during the process of uploading to the service, it still takes you to the screen where it asks you where you want to place the ads, and then I have to I have to click out of that, which is maddening to me. So
So what
if
you're saying
if I've
is
got
we're gonna have mattress and HelloFresh commercials.
my God, it was everything. I mean, it depended
No,
on.
you're gonna read them though.
Yeah, that's a bit of a stretch goal, but
This
Do you
episode
like
is
to
sponsored by HelloFresh.
yeah,
Do you like to cook but you don't like to think?
HelloFresh shows up on a lot of different types of podcasts. I'll tell you that. I think Joe Resington even read one.
Yeah,
at
he
some
does. Yeah.
point. Yeah.
he does. Yeah. That's
So that-
that's when I thought to myself that Joe Ressington had sold out.
And I thought to myself,
Joe Ressington likes money to survive.
Well, fair enough. I'm just taking the mic.
Yeah, I know.
so my first thing was, well, I'm not going to make the kind of money. I'm not even going to make enough to pay for the domain name. Then it's not even worth having. So I got rid of that. So if that's the case, then we might as well be on a platform that is respecting the Creative Commons license, such as what we use to make these episodes. So that is what's happening in the near future. It's actually been a thing for a while. I just haven't said anything, but we'll start announcing that, reminding everybody on every episode. Nothing to worry about right now, but we will let you know. So watch the space. Anyway, that's all I've got. If there's nothing else, we'll be back in 2 weeks. Let us know what you guys think. You can get a hold of us directly on the website or email show@linuxotc.org. We're on. Yep, we got the Mastodon, which is more. It's getting more use than I thought. But Twitter's a nightmare right now. I don't even know if it exists anymore.
The artist formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, I thought about that when that whole thing started. I like, hey, yeah, this reminds me of that whole thing with Prince. But anyway, see you in 2 weeks. Until that time, I've been Bill.
I've been Eric.
Well, I'm supposed to be
And here's
last,
where it
aren't I?
falls apart.
No,
Because
one of us
still
abstains
Leo.
from participating.
Yeah, let Eric.
No,
or let,
no,
let,
I won't do it.
see you, folks.